For more than 3 decades, Otzi the Iceman has captured the fascination of scientists, historians, and the public around the world. This story begins in the late summer of 1991, when 2 hikers happened upon the upper torso of a human body slowly emerging from the melting ice high in the Tyrolean Alps. What they discovered would soon be recognized as one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds of the 20th century, a prehistoric man, astonishingly preserved for over 5,000 years by the relentless cold of the mountains. Almost immediately, the mystery of Otzi ignited worldwide curiosity. This was not merely a skeleton, but an almost completely intact body, preserved by nature itself across millennia. His hair, skin, and even his clothing had survived thousands of years. Through meticulous research, scientists realized that Otzi offered a rare and nearly miraculous glimpse into life during the Copper Age in Europe. Little by little, the details of Otzi's life began to emerge, like pieces of an ancient, long-lost puzzle. His last meal, consisting of ibex and red deer meat, along with traces of emmer wheat still left in his stomach, offered a snapshot of the diverse diet of his time. His clothing, sewn from animal hides and woven grasses, as well as the traces of illness, arthritis, intestinal parasites, and even Lyme disease, were all recorded on his body, thousands of years before modern medicine would even have names for such conditions. Yet, the greatest mystery, and perhaps the most haunting, lies in Otzi's final moments. Etched into his bones is a story of violence. He died with an arrow lodged deep in his left shoulder, a wound almost certain to have killed him instantly. For years, many believed he might also have been finished off by a blow to the head, perhaps in an act of murder or revenge. More recent research, however, has opened up another possibility. After being struck by the arrow, he may have fallen from a cliff and ultimately froze to death beneath the ice and snow. Whatever the truth, Otzi's body remains a silent witness to a world long vanished, carrying secrets that scientists today are still working to decipher. Since his discovery, nearly every eye has turned toward Otzi, the Iceman. Scientists have examined every detail of his body, from his wounds and illnesses to the remnants of food in his stomach. Yet, even as layer upon layer of mystery about the man himself has been peeled back, the world he lived in remains shrouded in dense fog. We know about Otzi's unusual death, about the marks left on his skin and the objects he carried. But what was really happening in the world around him? What was the structure of society in Otzi's time? Did those who lived alongside him share his genetic and cultural roots? Or was Otzi a solitary wanderer in the harsh mountains? Did he belong to a stable community? Or was he truly an outsider, carrying his own secrets far from the rest of humanity? For many years, those questions could only be guessed at, pieced together from the scant remains found at archaeological sites in the Alps. But recently, thanks to remarkable advances in ancient DNA technology, researchers have begun to unlock secrets that once seemed destined to remain forever buried. For many years, the mysteries surrounding Otzi seemed all but impossible to unravel. Yet recently, scientists have discovered a crucial key: ancient DNA. At the Institute for Mummy Research in Bolzano, Italy, a team of experts launched an ambitious project analyzing DNA from 47 ancient skeletons found throughout the South Tyrol region of the Alps. These remains span a vast timeline, from the Middle Stone Age to the Middle Bronze Age, or roughly from 6400 to 1300 BCE. Among them, 15 individuals lived in the same era and region as Otzi himself. Around 3300 BCE, right at the peak of the Copper Age in Europe. The objective of this research was clear: to compare Otzi's genetic structure with that of his contemporaries and neighbors. Was Otzi a typical member of the ancient alpine community? Or was he an outlier, someone with a distinct genetic heritage, living among people who might only have encountered him on those steep, winding mountain paths? These new findings do more than just shed light on the enigma of Otzi himself. They open a window onto the wider world of ancient mountain societies, the migrations, the blending of bloodlines, and the changes that shape these communities over thousands of years. The Alps have a long and intricate human history that stretches back far before Otzi ever set foot on this ancient timeline. After the last ice age, about 18,000 years ago, as the vast glaciers finally retreated, the craggy lands of the Eastern Alps emerged beneath the sun. It was here that bands of Western European hunter-gatherers first arrived, marking the beginning of a long human presence in these rugged highlands. Time marched on. Around 7000 BCE, a new wave of people made their way into the region, farmers from Anatolia, in what is now modern-day Turkey. They brought with them the tools and knowledge of agriculture: barley, wheat, goats, sheep, and cattle. Along with their customs and way of life, They mixed with the indigenous hunter-gatherers, giving rise to the first settled communities in the mountains. Over generations, this blend created a unique genetic identity for the Alpine people. By about 4800 BCE, research shows that the population of the region had inherited as much as 80 to 90% of their genetic makeup from these Anatolian farmers. Remarkably, this proportion remained stable for thousands of years, resulting in a population that was isolated, largely untouched by major waves of migration from Central Europe and genetically closest to modern-day Sardinians in the Mediterranean. Once, these mountains were crossroads of culture and migration. Over time, however, they became a place that preserved a distinctive genetic legacy, a world waiting for Otzi to step into, and, eventually, become its most mysterious witness. At first glance, Otzi didn't seem all that different from the other ancient people who once called the Alps home. DNA analysis revealed that he carried up to 90% of his ancestry from Anatolian farmers, with only a small fraction coming from local hunter-gatherers, a genetic makeup typical of the Copper Age communities in that region. However, when scientists dug deeper into Otzi's genetic lineage, specifically examining two key indicators, his paternal Y-DNA and his maternal mtDNA, a very different picture began to emerge. Most of Otzi's contemporaries and neighbors carried the Y-DNA haplogroup G2AL497, a lineage common among Europe's earliest farming populations. But Otzi possessed a much rarer branch, G2A2B. This particular variant was scarcely found in the Alps during his time, making him stand out within his community. The differences didn't stop there. Otzi's maternal line was even more peculiar. He carried the coniferid lineage, a branch that had never been identified in any other ancient or modern person anywhere in the world. In other words, his mother's genetic heritage appears to be a lineage that has vanished entirely from human history, surviving only in the genetic trace left within Otzi himself. All of this makes Otzi a true anomaly, a man whose genetic signature matched no one around him, perhaps a remnant of a lost community or an extinct bloodline. And this only deepens the enigma, since the origins of Otzi himself remain an unsolved mystery. When researchers mapped the genetic makeup of Alpine communities during Otzi's era, they uncovered a rather distinctive social landscape. Evidence points to a strongly patriarchal society. Sons usually remained in their parents' village, inheriting land, traditions, and family customs. By contrast, daughters would leave home to marry into other villages, integrating into new communities far from where they were born. The diversity found in female genetic lineages is clear proof of this custom. Women arrived from many different places, bringing with them new genetic strands, silently connecting Alpine villages to the wider world through marriage and quiet migration. Yet, as always, there were exceptions to the rule. A handful of men carried rare Y-DNA haplogroups, with origins as distant as the Mediterranean or the Caucasus. Others bore genetic traces that only appeared with waves of migration during the later Bronze Age. This suggests that, while most Alpine inhabitants formed a relatively close society, the mountains occasionally served as a crossroads, a stopping point for travelers from faraway lands who left behind subtle but important genetic marks on the region's long and complex history. Genetic and archaeological discoveries now allow us to form a clearer picture of Otzi and his contemporaries, their appearance, and the material realities of their daily lives. 6 individuals, including Otzi himself, all shared several prominent features: brown eyes and dark brown to black hair, distinct characteristics inherited from their ancient Anatolian farming ancestors. Skin tone is harder to determine precisely, but evidence suggests it ranged from light to medium, reflecting a long history of genetic blending. One particularly telling detail is that none of them could digest lactose as adults. This is an important clue, showing that the gene for lactose tolerance had not yet appeared in these mountain populations at the time. In other words, milk and dairy products were not yet part of their diet. Their nutrition still relied on much older, traditional sources. Otzi's last meal, a mix of wild ibex meat, emmer wheat, and bracken fern, vividly illustrates the diversity of subsistence strategies among ancient Alpine people. They hunted wild animals, cultivated crops, and foraged for wild plants, making the most of every resource that their harsh environment could offer. Otzi's belongings, meanwhile, reveal a surprising degree of connection with the wider prehistoric world. His copper axe originated in Tuscany. The amber beads he carried came from the distant Baltic, and pieces of obsidian in his toolkit had traveled from the Mediterranean. These items show that, even while living amidst remote mountains, Otzi's community was still part of an extensive trade network that stretched across prehistoric Europe. The history of the Alps didn't end with Otzi. In the millennia that followed, the region would undergo tremendous genetic upheaval. Around 2400 BCE, as the early Bronze Age spread across Europe, a new wave of migrants surged into the mountains from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, a vast region that today stretches from Ukraine to Kazakhstan. With them came the first horses, advanced bronze tools, and an entirely new genetic legacy that flowed into alpine communities. Genetic research has revealed that, by this period, some mountain dwellers already carried up to a third of their ancestry from these steppe peoples, a phenomenon known as steppe ancestry. There were also individuals who possessed genes tracing back to the Caucasus, or even to Neolithic populations from Iran. These findings suggest that, by this time, the Alps had become a crossroads of migration and exchange, far more open and diverse than the isolated stronghold it might appear. But Otzi lived before all of these sweeping changes took place. He belonged to a community that was stable, almost isolated amid the rugged peaks, a population with little or no admixture from distant lands. His was an original society, carrying genetic legacies that had persisted for thousands of years, standing at the threshold just before the great waves of history swept away that stability forever. The violent and unusual death of Otzi has become one of the greatest mysteries in modern archaeology. The discovery of an arrowhead lodged deep in his back has sparked countless theories. Was Otzi the victim of a murder? Was he attacked in the midst of a dispute or caught up in a personal vendetta? Some researchers have even suggested the possibility of a ritual or sacrificial killing. Perhaps most intriguing is the idea that Otzi's rare genetic lineage supports the theory that he was a traveler, or perhaps someone who came from elsewhere, an outsider who did not truly belong to the local alpine community. Could it have been this very difference that made him a target, leading to his lonely and mysterious death high in the mountains, far from any known human settlement of his time? With each new analysis, Otzi emerges not only as a typical inhabitant of the Copper Age Alps, but also as a man carrying a unique, isolated genetic legacy, a missing link in the story of Europe's ancient peoples. This distinctiveness might help explain why his life ended in solitude and silence amid the frozen peaks, far from the comfort and safety of a community. And yet, the story of Otzi and the mystery of his origins is far from over. As genetic research and archaeology continue to advance, new discoveries emerge every year, opening fresh chapters in the unwritten history of prehistoric people and the vanished worlds they once inhabited. Otzi is not just a witness to the distant past, he is a key to understanding the long journey of evolution, migration, and the convergence of our ancestors. If you found this story fascinating, leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have about Otzi and the lingering mysteries of his life. Don't forget to share this video so that more people can join the adventure, and subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss any new journeys into the surprising and mysterious world of human history. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next story.